Jacob, I loved this story as a kid.
Yeah.
And Jacob wrestled with God. And I mean, even when I wrestled in high school, it brought that experience to my interpretation. And I'm like, I know what went into wrestling. And I mean, like, I still have a little bit of cauliflower. Is it this year? It's this year. You see how like it's a little wrinkled up. Anyway,
Little bit,
got
yeah.
a little bit of cauliflower, but I only wrestled for 1 year in my high school, and it was tough stuff. So I'm like, obviously, I have this image of what wrestling is, and I can't imagine it was identical to what we're reading, but they're fighting, they're struggling, something's going on with Jacob and God reached into his hip, and I'm thinking like he dislocated his hip like that. I was like, and next thing you know, he's limping off, going, man, he kicked my ass. But Francesca like blew my mind and went, that's actually probably a euphemism. And I'm going, what is going on with Jacob wrestling God here? Is there something more going on?
So that's another story where it's a little ambiguous, and I think we gotta let both of these stories kind of marinate and figure out what the significance of each is, because it talks at the end about how that's the story where it says at the very end that's why we don't eat that ligament to this very day or something like that. And so some folks would say this was added as an etiology for some kind of dietary practice. And I'm reading right now Jonathan Adler's wonderful book on the invention of Judaism, where he says that is really outside of Leviticus and the Torah's dietary prohibitions. That is the only story within the narrative portions of the entire Hebrew Bible that mentions any dietary restriction. And so and it's not listed anywhere in the dietary restrictions of the Torah. But so that may be an etiology for what's going on there.
Like they're trying to cover up something, maybe, in a way.
They're trying to say, whenever there are practices that people do, and in ritual studies they refer to these as causally opaque. We don't know why we do this. We don't know what it accomplishes, but we do it anyway. The people will try to come up with explanations. And so an etiology is saying, oh, we do this because there's this story and that's what happened. And so because of that, we do this. And those stories usually have nothing to do with how that practice originally came about. So Jonathan explains that is probably an etiological story to account for why that part of the hip or that area was not consumed. But yeah, at the same time, that region is frequently used as a euphemism for the genitals when it talks about the thigh, the leg, the hip. It's really meaning, around the corner from there. And so, and
we use bosom even to kind of,
yeah. And these are, the genitals are a pretty important part of the social body at the time, because reproduction was so important to everybody. We're living in a time where survival is not guaranteed, not even remotely. And so you want to be able to reproduce. And this is why you have this law, for instance, that's, I think it's in Leviticus, where if some people are, if a woman is fighting and she grabs some dude's junk, they drop the hammer, because that's a big deal. And so there is symbolic significance to someone wrestling and someone grabbing the junk. That's a no-no. That is off limits in wrestling back then. So I think that that probably comes into play as well. And I think it's important that we think about what the significance of that could be. So again, this could be playing multiple different roles. This could be functioning in a few different ways. But this is another story that most of the people who talk about this story these days think of this not as God, but as an angel. And it doesn't say angel anywhere in the story at all. It says, Jacob says at the end, I have seen God face to face. But we have way back in Hosea, we have this story, and it says that he fought with the angel and prevailed. But when you look at the text, we miss out on this handy little etiology. Vayasar el malach if you take El as the preposition, as the kind of pointing to the direct object, malach, you miss out on Vayasar El as an etiology for the name Israel. God, it's fight with God, or El prevails, or El contends, or something like that. But I have argued that an editor at some point added the word malach there in Hosea as well, which produces the idea that Jacob was fighting with an angel, and that becomes the interpretive lens for reading that story in Genesis for 2,000 plus years. So again, some folks somewhere along the way have decided they were uncomfortable with God being in that position, and particularly with Jacob handing it to God for most of this fight, until God says, you know what, I'm going below the belt.